Hi, my name is John Zurn, and I thought I'd talk to you a little bit today about my new book, The Comedy in Everyday Life. First, I thought I'd give you a little background information. I was trying to write humorous stories for magazines, and I wasn't getting anywhere, so I started writing stories for a book club that I'm in. So I'd write a few stories, and I'd get some hits. I'd write a few stories, I'd get some hits. So by the time about 6 or 7 months passed, I had about 3,200 hits. So I decided, okay, at least my writing might be interesting. I always hate to write and not knowing if anybody's going to read it at all. So this was different. I also wanted to make sure that these books would be inexpensive to buy. So they're inexpensive. They're $1.99 on ebooks on Barnes & Noble, and they're $5 for paperback on Amazon, which is pretty inexpensive. So here's my book formula. The stories had to be funny and true, and they had to be would have no vulgarity in them. So I'd like to give you some examples of some titles. Senior Moments is one. The Secrets of Shopping is another. The Customer Isn't Always Right is another one. Star Trek and the Wrath of John. Husband Improvement Projects, Medicare with the Stars, and the last one is Remembering the Moby Jack. Now I thought I'd give you some insight into some of the stories and give hopefully the funny parts in a few of them, and there's other funny parts in those same stories, but the first ones are about nature. When we were at the Smoky Mountains, we found out that there were bears everywhere, and we were told by the rangers and hikers, and there were signs, be careful of bears and so forth. So we finally got tired hiking, and we went into camp. And when we went to camp, we went to bed, and at about 9 o'clock I started hearing these sounds. So I froze stiff like you do sometimes, and by freezing stiff I didn't know what was outside the tent, but I couldn't move. So about 20 minutes later I found out that it was my air mattress that was making the noise. Another time we were in the Porcupine Mountains hiking, and we were camping as well, and they were big about putting away your garbage because the bears go around the circle area the whole time as soon as they know there's food around. So we put our garbage in a white sack. And then we went hiking for the day, and then when we came back, the kids were so excited, running around, there's a bear in the camp, there's a bear in the camp. And we're all saying to each other, what kind of arrogant idiot would do such a thing? Don't they know any better? They're camping in the woods. So we get to where all the excitement is, and it was our trash. We forgot to put it into the wagon. So we had experiences with other animals too, like hummingbirds. We had 3 big feeders, and they used to come all the time. They stopped coming, so we couldn't figure out what was going on. And then we saw that they were all empty. So what are we going to do? We finally got new ones, and they were still empty. Then one day at about 11 o'clock at night, I see one of the big feeders going back and forth like this, like it's a strong wind. And it turned out it was a raccoon the size of a dog that had gone all the way up and upside down getting the bird feeder. So after that we made it even higher, and then we had no more trouble with raccoons. Now my mother was, she passed a couple years ago, but she was a great lover of wildlife. And she found out that there were some raccoons under the porch, but she would have nothing to do with animal control getting them out. But she did hear on the radio that if you take ammonia and you pick a light and you take something else, but you put them on sound, you put them all together and it'll drive the raccoons out. Well, we went to see him a couple days later, and Donna noticed that the porch was smoking, probably on fire at that point. So it turned out those 3 combinations were not good at all to get the raccoons out. They're probably still there. Now I had another experience at the Grand Canyon where I was eager to get going. I'm impatient sometimes, and my relatives were taking pictures of the signs like 5 feet from the trail. So finally I just jumped on the trail and left, and I was gone for about 5 hours. By the time I got to the bottom of the trail, I was so exhausted I had no idea how I was going to get up. I got to the Venetian Gardens down there, and I was really freaking out because I was so exhausted I didn't know how I was going to get back up. But then I watched the people climbing back up in front of me, and they were going on a switchback, 1, 2, rest, 1, 2, so I knew I could do that. But by the time I got back up there, I was getting the silent treatment, and everybody was really angry that I left for 5 hours, and they were sitting on a bench, so I pulled out the only excuse I could think of, which was, I'm sorry. And that works quite a bit of the time. Not always, but I'm sorry can be very useful at times. Now, in my work environment, I had a lot of experience that were interesting to say the least. I managed a Jack in the Box in Chicago for a year, and it took me a while to get used to the Moby Jack. They've got the bonus Jack and the double jumbo Jack, but the Moby Jack was the hardest one to not laugh at, because we need 2 Moby Jacks. The fish sandwich, of course, but we had other things go on too. One time, people basically, we were a 24-hour store, so people got drunk, and after they get drunk, they would come up to the menu board, and they'd just look at it, and they'd be tipsing, not knowing what to do. So we figured out a way to help them. So we'd say, is that a jumbo Jack? Yeah, yeah. Is that a large fries? Yeah, yeah. Is that a large Coke? Yeah, yeah. And then we go to the next one. I did have an irate customer one time because his girlfriend got a little worm in her lettuce. Now, to defend ourselves, we got the lettuce in these big purveyor things. We didn't make our own, but he was very angry. So we decided the best thing to do was just give him a whole new meal. And he was swearing at me all the way out the door, but they got their new meal, right? And I apologize. Again, I'm sorry. So he got out there, and he threw the food all over the parking lot, so I guess he wasn't a satisfied customer after all. But then we also had, as being a 24-hour store, at night we would dump the grease. And the grease was supposed to go in a barrel that was actually in a fenced-off area. Well, a health commissioner came in, health inspector came, and he said that they'd been dumping it down the sewer. And I said, that can't be, we got a can right back there. So when we went by the sewer, he started skating all over it, which told me that he was actually right. I worked at Kresge's for a while, and I guess one funny thing that happened there is they had if we had to get something back for credit, we had to have more than 1 or 2. We had to have like 6. So we had 2 Barbie dolls that were broken, and the boss comes up to me and says, now, Mr. Zurn, we need to break 4 Barbie dolls and send them in so we can send them in. And I said to him, you mean you want me to arrange for a little accident for Barbie? And no laugh at all. But I thought it was pretty funny. Now in school, cross country was fun. I was pretty good at it, but I was always getting lost, so I got the name Davy Crockett after a while. We also would always get a big meal after we finished Invitational on the way home. So we'd have our meal, we're singing Yellow Submarine on the bus. Finally, one of the guys in the front turns around and says, cross country would be great if it wasn't for the running, which happens sometimes, I'm sure. Now, I went to Montessori, so I taught at a preschool, at Montessori school for a couple of years, and those kids they're great, and if they had tied a knot in their shoe and you untied it, it was like a miracle that you would help them. But some kids, initially anyway, had a lot of trouble leaving their parents at the door, and one kid had a real problem. So we worked out a system that every time he got to school, his mother would, the picture window outside, she'd wave to him and say goodbye. Yeah, one day she forgot, and he was freaking out for like 4 hours, so we found his mother could come back and wave through the window. Another interesting story was, my brother and I, everybody tries to be cool in school, right? Even in elementary school. We were required to wear these galoshes, and they looked terrible, so for us, anyway. So we hid them under a tree on the way to work, under a big pine tree. So when we come back to take them home with us, they're gone. So my mother says, what happened to your boots? What happened to your boots? Well, 2 minutes later, she's showing us the boots because she actually found them. Another example of not fooling getting by my mother was we had a thing in high school where one would sleep at that one house and one would sleep at the other, so we just go out all night. So one day I was sick and I went out anyway, and my mother called to see if I was okay, and I wasn't there. So the next morning I come tromping in at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and she's vacuuming right in front of the door. So she said, "Do you have a nice time at Paul's?" "Oh yeah, I had a great time." The vacuums are going faster and faster. I said, "Yeah, we had a great time." "You did you?" "Oh yeah." And then she said, "Where were you all night?" And that vacuum just about flew at me. So another kind of a side story, but it's pretty funny, is when we were in high school, marijuana was illegal. I'm not going to tell who it was in the family, but he got some, and he had it hidden. And my mother thought it was decoupage. So she was making things with it until she found out that it was marijuana. Then her and her friend got rid of it in like 10 different places, in the dumpster, in the toilet, everywhere. So a really interesting thing happened. And when I was in Elmira, we were just getting ready to move. And we were supposed to move actually on the day of my high school graduation. But the problem was that we just sold the house. So we asked the owner if he could wait a day so I could go to my graduation. He said no. He says, "If you don't sell me this house today, I don't want it. So it's now or never." So he signed the house. He signed for the house. We walked out the door, and Elmira had one of the biggest floods it had in a number of years, and our house was flooded up to the second floor. So my mother asked an attorney, what's going on here? "If he signed the house, it's his." And you know what I say? What high school graduation? So I don't want to make this too long, but I thought I'd read a couple of passages. One is called Star Trek, Star Trek and the Wrath of John. This is a support group situation. "Hello, my name is John, and my wife is addicted to Star Trek." "Hi, John. My wife's problem initially began when she recorded every episode of Star Trek and then put them all in chronological order. This obsession has grown worse, and now she has developed the need to purchase the entire series, the movies, and subsequent spin-offs. Since Donna has always had a great career that far surpasses my jobs I've had, I cannot complain too much about the Christmas knickknacks. However, I refuse to play the board game with her because she might be smarter than I am." Then there's another little section. Excuse me just a minute while I find it. Medicare with the Stars. "I remember an old commercial pitch that began with the promise, 'I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV.' I've always wondered why the creators of that commercial couldn't find thousands of actual doctors among the thousands of photogenic physicians. The same is true, I think, of the Medicare commercials that invade our space at home. For example, just because Captain T. Kirk can navigate a starship doesn't necessarily mean that William Shatner can navigate through the Medicare system. It is also true that even though Joe Namath and Joe Theismann can read and interpret the toughest defenses, that doesn't guarantee they will understand Medicare coverage. In addition, simply because Jimmy Walker had his own TV sitcom doesn't promise that his knowledge of Medicare is dynamite." And then finally, I've got one section. "My wife isn't the boss of me. Don and I were married 39 years ago, but we never raised children. I keep telling people we have no children, but she insists that we have one. Anyway, as one might expect, I've risen to the position of assistant manager in our household. This job continues to present a number of challenges, however, one of which turns out to be Donna's management style. Although I try to be patient and understanding, sometimes it can be difficult for me, despite my attempts to point out her mistakes. To be candid, my wife can be awfully stubborn. I've observed that it runs in her family, but she seems the most likely to state her opinion. For instance, she continually asserts that she is right about almost everything, inferring that she is more intelligent than I am. Nevertheless, I'm keeping a close watch on things, and someday, if she makes a mistake, I'll be right there to point it out to her. I'm not the one making all mistakes. As the famous phrase goes, denial is more than a river in Egypt. So there's many more stories in this book, but the idea when I wrote it was to make them funny as possible, and with some satire, of course, but also so you could read a couple at a time or three at a time when you have the time. And also, again, I tried to make them inexpensive, because no matter how good a book is, nobody wants to pay a lot of money for them. So I'd just like to thank you all for coming today, or for listening today. And I want to let you know that in Yorkville, at the Yorkville Library, on April 31st, April 30th, sorry, see, she's right again, April 30th, 1 to 3, we're going to have a book reading about the comedy in everyday life, and there will be free refreshments. So thanks so much.